When it comes to filming an Apple log on your iPhone 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max, there are 4 things that you need to know before you get started filming. Now, these are really important things that I think no one's really talking about too much, and I wanted to break down what it takes to start color grading Apple log and some things that you need to know before you start filming so that you can get the most out of your footage. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a closer look. So the first step that you need to know is how to properly load the LUT in Final Cut. DaVinci Resolve and Premiere are a little bit different and they don't require this step, but there's an additional step you do need to make in Final Cut before you start using your conversion LUT, or else it's going to look really bad. So let's go ahead and grab a custom LUT effect over here and we're going to drag it onto this clip. So I'm going to go ahead and select our base LUT from Gamut, and this is a brand new Apple log LUT, and this is a really great starting point to get grading your footage. And also, this is completely free, so go ahead and pick it up in the description of this video. But we're going to go ahead and navigate to Base LUTs, Apple Log Primary, and select it. And right off the bat, you can see that this looks not so great. There's a lot of extra saturation happening. It looks like the reds are pushing, the skin tones don't look just right. And it's because if you select this clip and you look at your inspector over here, you're going to notice that this is in Rec 2020. And because of that, we need to make sure that our input is selected to Rec 2020. And once we do that, the footage immediately converts to the proper color space and the LUT is loaded correctly. If you don't do this step, it's not going to look good at all. Another quick step is if you click Choose Custom LUT, you can navigate to that folder, and then just here on this drop down, go ahead and select Rec 2020, and that will enable everything in that folder to automatically be loaded in as a Rec 2020 clip. So if I go ahead and select, say, a different LUT, like this low ISO setting, which I'll get to later, it will automatically keep the input to Rec 2020. Now, we're going to go ahead and move on to our second step, and this one is the difference between a standard lens and the telephoto lens. And I've noticed that the noise is different for each lens, so that's something that we need to notice. And what I found out is that this clip right here, this was shot under 400 ISO, and we have really clean shadows. This is the log clip without any conversion on it, and we see that there's hardly any noise in the shadows, which is really good and clean. Let's go ahead and enable this LUT right here so that we can kind of see it converted to the Rec 709 color space, and all the shadow detail is really healthy, looks good, not a lot of noise. When we select a very similar clip and we are using the telephoto lens, we notice that we get a lot more noise in the shadows, which isn't happening in the standard lens. So we notice that whenever we enable this LUT, we can see that we have a lot more noise going on in this clip, and it is just something to be aware of, that you might not be able to get the best noise reduction that's happening naturally in the standard lens, also on the tele lens. So second thing to note is that whenever you're shooting on the telephoto lens, you might be introducing a lot more noise because that lens does not have noise reduction being applied the same way it is to the standard lens. All right, and that gets me to this third step, which is probably the most important. I did a lot of testing with this camera and checking out the Apple log profile at all different ISO ranges to try to find the best dynamic range, least amount of noise, like what looks good. And what I noticed overall is that when you're filming on the standard lens and you're shooting at 400 ISO or lower, you're going to be having really good clean footage. I feel like there's a lot of noise reduction that's naturally happening in that lens. I don't know what they're doing, but once you go above 400, you start to see noise start to appear a lot more, and that happens all the way up to 2000. And so when you're filming, I recommend shooting at 400 ISO or lower to get really clean footage. But if you want to shoot higher, you can do that as well. And I'm going to go over some different ISO settings so that you can make sure that you're getting the most out of filming in this profile. So up first, we have this clip, and here we can have this overlay. So I am able to show you the settings for this clip. And I was shooting at ISO 100, and then I also filmed up at 250 and 400 and 800, and then all the way up to get different spectrums. And what I noticed is whenever we're at 250, we're going to look over here in this shadow range. Whenever I click up to 2000, you can see they're very similar, but we do get a lot more noise happening in this range. And I'm going to go ahead and select this clip and just zoom in so that you can kind of see this area. But we're going to take a look at this footage right here. You can see the noise taking place, but when we're at 250, it's much cleaner. Anything below 400 looks really clean, and then 2000 obviously is going to be introducing a lot more noise. But one thing that was really interesting is that I noticed that with the different ISO values, there are different highlight clipping points with the gamma curve, which is very different from shooting like S-Log3 or V-Log or Canon Log 2, where you're always going to clip your highlights at a certain IRE value. And this profile, Apple Log, is very different. Everything under 400 ISO clips at around 82. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how I figured that out and what I'm looking at. So we're going to go ahead and show this top clip, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger so we can kind of see. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to select 400. And what I did is in the camera, made sure I overexposed to kind of see what that clipping point is. And whenever we go to, I'm going to go ahead and actually disable the LUT so that we can see the log image right here. And then I can just disable that. And we can look at the waveform over here on this RGB Parade, and we can see that the highlights are clipping right around 82. And as we increase, I'm going to show you what it looks like on the zebras here. So I went ahead and turned the zebras on, and I went through each ISO value to kind of see where it's clipping. And so whenever you're filming in 400 ISO and you switch over to your zebras, you can see that whenever we go to around 82, that's whenever the highlights look like they're clipping. If we bump up to ISO 800, then we notice that the clipping point is going to be raised to about 88, 89. And then whenever we go to 1250, it looks like it's clipping closer to 94. And then up to 1600, we're about 90. Let's see, 1600, we're going to be closer to 96, 97. And then all the way up to 2000 is where you start to peak at 99. So that is what I noticed with all the different changes. And to me, it comes across as a floating like highlight clipping point. So anything above 400 to 2000 is that spectrum where your highlights are going to be changing intervals. So keep that in mind. If you film over 400, you'll most likely need to manually adjust the highlight clipping point because it is going to be altered by this gamma curve for some reason. And I did notice that this is also different for the telephoto lens. If you're shooting that, you want to be under 250. So standard lens 400 or lower, the telephoto lens, you're going to be 250. Anything, and then from 250 to 3200 is where it has that floating highlight point as well. So that's just something to be aware of when you're filming in that lens. You're going to need to adjust your highlights. Now, I went ahead and made an actual LUT variation for anything that is under 400 ISO because it is not taking into consideration the clipping point for anything below 400. So if we come over, let's take a look at this one clip. So this is, I'm going to go ahead and just disable this right here. This is at 400 ISO, and then this is going to be at 2000 ISO. And you can see that the 2000 is clipping all the way up there. And if we went ahead and enabled our LUT, you can see that it's not going to reach the full potential of that 100 IRE and get that pure white clipping point. So I went ahead and made an alternate version of a conversion LUT in order to compensate for anything that's shot lower than 400 ISO. So if you're filming lower than 400 ISO, throw on this other version of the LUT, which we have available. And this one is called Apple Log Low ISO. And when you do that, you can see that it raises that final spectrum, and it's not necessarily giving you more information. It's just taking that highlight, that little roll off at the top, and just expanding it. And what's really cool is I can show you this one clip over here when we're looking at this footage. And this is just the standard log footage. You can see that we're not clipping anything above 82. So it's sitting right there. And if we select our primary LUT first and enable that, it looks really good, but we're not getting this extra highlight information. If we switch to the base LUTs and use the low ISO setting, immediately you can see we get this highlight retention, all this extra data, it seems, back into these higher clipping points, which are usually where the clouds are and other moments like that. So if you want the most out of your footage and you're filming lower than 400, you're getting really good clean footage, then use this LUT to help expand that highlight retention that you're getting in that higher range of your footage. So that's something to just be aware of. And then whenever you put it on the rest of the footage, it looks absolutely phenomenal. Because here I have the clip, I'm going to go ahead and add the LUT, and then you can add any kind of creative LUT on top of it. This one I have called Orion Warm Crush, and that's from Gamut, which you can also check out in the description of this video. And then I added a little bit of film convert to kind of give a little bit of grain and immediately have a really good shot that looks absolutely phenomenal. And this was all filmed entirely on the iPhone 15 Pro Max in Apple Log 422, and the footage just looks absolutely amazing. Now, the last thing that I wanted to share is also the setting in the Blackmagic camera app. Now, this is a free app and I highly recommend using it. It is the best app that I've used so far whenever I want to film in Apple Log. And the really great advantage is you can actually film in 4K 60 frames per second. You can see this clip right here that we filmed in 4K 60 frames per second internal, did not use an external hard drive. If you're filming in the native camera app on your iPhone, you will not be able to film 4K 60 unless you have an external hard drive. However, in the Blackmagic camera app, which is free, you can actually film in 4K 60. So that's another big advantage and a reason why I highly recommend using that app. So that's it. Those are the 4 steps that I wanted to just mention to you before you start filming in Apple Log to make sure that you're getting the most out of your camera and out of that profile. You can grab the Apple Log Baselets for free in the link in the description of this video. We're actually giving it away entirely free, both of the LUTs, the primary version and the low ISO one. So definitely check that out. If you have any questions, just hit us up in the comments below. I'd love to kind of hear your feedback on this, and make sure that you also like this video if it was helpful, and please subscribe so that you don't miss the next video we put out, and I'll see you in the next video.